I recently added 50% to my Pershing Square Holdings position, which is the hedge fund run by Bill Ackman, so it's currently my largest position in my stock portfolio. I want to explain the rationale behind adding to that position, but before I get into that, just want to introduce myself for anyone who is new to the channel. My name's Jack Duffley, and I'm a 24-year-old real estate investor and attorney, and on this channel I cover a variety of topics as they have to do with investing and personal finance, so if you like that sort of content, be sure to have a look around the channel, and if you like what you see, be sure to subscribe. But about 6 months ago, I opened up a new position in Pershing Square Holdings, which is the hedge fund run by billionaire Bill Ackman. I did a video going over my rationale for opening up that position, and I'll include that in the description below. I want to give a little bit of an update since some things have changed in the fund. One of the big changes in recent months was that Ackman sold off Starbucks and then essentially replaced that position with Domino's Pizza. I personally liked that move since I thought Starbucks was getting perhaps a little bit overvalued, or maybe not even overvalued, but it got up to probably what Ackman's price target was for it a little bit too quickly, which is never a bad thing, so he sold that off. But then, as Ackman has said, a rather random opportunity to invest in Domino's Pizza at a relatively lower price came up, and they took advantage of that window, invested pretty heavily into it, and it almost made up the same sort of position that Starbucks used to occupy in the fund. All things considered, it wasn't a super substantial move in that it was just moving from one restaurant into another. Granted, Starbucks and Domino's are very different in what they actually do, but the actual business model is very similar. It's a bunch of restaurants all over the place. But the biggest updates to the fund since I've invested in it have been around the Pershing Square Tontine Holdings SPAC, which I've covered quite a bit about on this channel. Pershing Square Tontine Holdings is the largest SPAC ever created. A SPAC is a special purpose acquisition company, and it's a vehicle that's used to try and invest in a private company to take it public rather than having the private company go directly public itself. So it's kind of a sort of publicly funded venture capital sort of tool. That's how I kind of look at it. That's kind of a oversimplification, but that's generally how it works. The SPAC will take itself public without anything really in it, will pile up a bunch of cash, and then will agree to try and find some target within some time period. And then once it finds that target, typically what would happen is the SPAC and the company would merge, and then the actual SPAC would become the company that it acquired, essentially, and that company it acquired would be the new public entity. Now, SPACs can get quite a bit complicated, especially in how they're structured on the back end with warrants and also compensation for the actual sponsor. But Pershing Square Holdings, the hedge fund, is the sponsor for Pershing Square Tontine Holdings, the SPAC. And the SPAC recently announced that it is acquiring a portion of Universal Music Group. And Universal Music Group is one of the top music companies out there, if not the top, in that they have a lot of the top artists. In fact, I think they have agreements with all of the top 10 artists in the world. So they are clicking on all cylinders. They've really gotten hard into the streaming game, which is the growing sector of the music industry. So they're doing very well based on what we know about the company. And Pershing Square Tontine Holdings is acquiring 10% of Universal Music Group. So that means that Pershing Square Holdings, the hedge fund, is getting a portion of UMG as well. Now, I'm not super sure on how great of a deal Pershing Square Tontine Holdings is getting on UMG specifically. It seems like there's a pretty substantial discount there compared to what it probably is going to go public at. Of course, this isn't financial advice, and we still need to know a lot about what actually is going to happen here, and there are some details that still need to be worked out, but it seems like Pershing Square Tontine Holdings is getting a good deal on the price for UMG. But that's not where this deal ends, because Tontine Holdings is not using all of the cash that they had to do this UMG deal. There's a lot of cash left over. So what's happening with that cash? Well, it's going into two places essentially, but really all the cash itself is going into one, and that is a new Remainco, which is where all the remaining funds from the SPAC will be going, and that will actually be just a company that has a bunch of cash in it. But theoretically, if the SEC says it's okay, it's not going to have the same sort of limitations as a SPAC with time limits and having to find a target. It will actually just be an incorporated company that has pretty much nothing else besides cash in it. Well, I shouldn't say nothing else, because many of the warrants that would have applied to a SPAC deal with Pershing Square Tontine Holdings are actually being rotated into Remainco, and we're actually still waiting on some details there. So Pershing Square Tontine shareholders, which includes Pershing Square Holdings, will get a chance to buy Remainco via the warrants that will be being pivoted towards that. Again, we'll know more details about that soon. So that's potentially some more value for Pershing Square right there, in that they'll be able to get a discount on Remainco in addition addition to getting their share of UMG from the initial deal. But it doesn't end there either, because there's a third element to this Tontine Holdings transaction, and that is a new SPARC, or a special purpose acquisition rights company, which is very similar to a SPAC, only it behaves much more like an option, at least in how I'm understanding it. Every Tontine Holdings shareholder will get his or her portion of a new SPARC offering, and the SPARC will be the right, but not the obligation, to acquire some new target in the future that Pershing Square picks. And the way this sounds like it's going to work, again, if the SEC says it's okay, is that the SPARC will say that it's going to acquire some target at some price. It will then go to the SPARC right holders saying, hey, do you want to invest in this at this price? If not, you can sell your right to someone else, and then they'll buy it at that price. That's kind of the idea. So really, it's like an option to purchase whatever that future deal is. Now, we're not clear on the actual timeline. Bill Ackman says that they're actually working on multiple new deals right now. Nothing is set in stone, and they're still looking, but they are actively searching for a new deal for both Remainco, the cash company, and then also for the SPARC, the rights company. It doesn't really have any cash in it, only a right for investors to purchase whatever that deal ends up being. What this means is that Pershing Square, the hedge fund, has a significant amount of liquidity for future deals beyond just this UMG deal, which might be pretty great in itself, depending on how you value Universal Music Group. And because of the complexity with the Pershing Square Tontine Holdings deal, and I think with some of the regulatory risk with what the SEC might or might not say, since this is a very new sort of ball game with SPACs and then the SPARC and then the Remainco, what's okay, what's not okay, that's still a little unclear. But if all or even most goes well, it seems like Pershing Square will be in a very, very good position when it comes to acquiring new deals in the future. And Ackman will continue to solidify his reputation as a deal maker, as someone who can get good value out of deals and potentially turn around companies. He has a very activist reputation in that he can try and turn around companies or create new spin-offs or do whatever it takes to try and create new value for shareholders. Of course, he's not without controversy.
Hell is coming.
But overall, I think Pershing Square Holdings is in a very good position, and I think a better position than where they were some 6 months ago. And they were in a good position then. They still have some downside protection with the credit default swaps that they acquired, but even without that, there's still so much new liquidity that they can pull from to do new deals. So they're very well equipped to take advantage of any short-term blips in the market, or even if they could just find a deal normally, they will be in very good shape, I would think, for the future. So with that, I added 50% to my Pershing Square Holdings position to where now it is $15,000, which is a pretty significant portion of my net worth and is the largest holding in my stock portfolio, just ahead of Equity Commonwealth, which is a REIT run by Sam Zell. Covered a lot about that on the channel as well. And I probably would have added more to this position if I wasn't currently looking for a real estate deal. I'm under contract on one right now, and it's looking more and more likely like we're going to close. So I want to make sure I have enough cash available to fund the down payment, closing costs, any expenses up front, building a reserve fund, and it just didn't make sense to put that in the market since I'm so close to getting a deal done. If you're curious about that real estate deal, definitely subscribe, since I'll put out some updates about it very soon. I just don't want to do it right now while we're still kind of in the inspection and doing negotiations. I want to make sure we have some more information, and then I can share what I've learned from it as well as what's going on. And if you guys want to learn more about that real estate deal, I'll have some information about it coming out soon. I just want to get through the inspection and review process and make sure everything is solidified before I start talking about things like they're set in stone, because they very much are not. That's the big part of real estate, in that you have a lot of due diligence to get through, and that can always throw a wrench in things. But I promise to have some sort of content about it very soon once we either finish the deal or we're getting very close to finishing it, or even if it falls through, because there's always something to learn from whatever happens. Anyways, if you like this video, please like it, since that would help the channel out a lot. And if you like this sort of content about investing and personal finance, then definitely subscribe, since I put out new videos every single week and wouldn't want you guys to miss out. And check out the free stuff and the affiliate links in the description below. But until next time, take care.